What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another edition of Touchline Talk here on 110 Sports. Of course, everybody was looking forward to that Merseyside Derby just because of the significance what Everton's done so far this season. Didn't exactly necessarily get the game I thought we would in terms of actual drama from a tactical perspective or based on the scoreline, but boy was that controversial. That's at the end of the day, I mean, sort of all you can ask for in terms of entertainment. Of course, you don't want that entertainment coming at the expense of injuries, and we'll get to that in a minute. But that was that game lived up to the hype in a less than ideal way, but it sure delivered. So we're jumping right into our first five here. There's no other place to start but this Merseyside Derby. Before we get to the end, I want to start at the beginning because to me that is the most important takeaway from this game, which is why I said from a tactical or scoreline perspective, it didn't deliver as in a way that I thought it might, because we're coming out of this game talking about Jordan Pickford and what he did to Virgil van Dijk. Because Van Dijk is the best defender in the world, and because somehow Jordan Pickford wasn't sent off for that. I have no explanation as to how that wasn't a red card. To me, it was blatantly obvious. And I don't want to hear about it being offside and after the play ended or whatever, because you don't get to use that explanation or that excuse when you're telling assistant referees to put their flags down and let a play finish and then go back and say it was offside. If you're saying we're going to play, then you need to referee through the end of that play. You can't just let the play continue and then give people free rein to do whatever they want. That was a incredibly reckless challenge that has no place in the game. It was a red card. I don't know what else to say about it. To me, there is no other explanation. He was incredibly lucky not to be sent off. And the reason red cards are in this sport and why you don't want plays like that is to avoid injuries like the one Virgil van Dijk now has. This is a massive blow to Liverpool. It's still not clear how long he's going to be out. But you just hate to see a player of Van Dijk's caliber sidelined for a significant amount of time because of a play like that. Injuries happen, but that's one that could have been avoided. And the fact that Pickford's not going to be penalized in any way, shape, or form for it is beyond explanation for me. That's where this has to start. That is the single biggest takeaway from this game. Then you get into everything else that happened. And so we'll go to the end of the game now. And I took a poll on this because I have a theory and I wanted to run it by the Twitter populace, and the response I got generally backed up my theory. On the Jordan Henderson goal, no goal, overturned VAR decision, I saw Grant Wall on Twitter make the point that that's not a VAR issue, that's a offside rule issue. And to a certain extent, he's right. The offside rule is not good. It's not incredibly clear. It's the same issue you have with handball, where part of this is your referees are going by the rules and the rules are not helping them. There's definitely room for improvement there. And they keep trying to change these different things, and there's just not really been a good solution yet. And there may just not be one, because this is such a gray area in a sport that is more gray than black and white in terms of the way it's officiated, just by the nature of the way the sport's played. But however you feel about the offside rule, the reality is that this sport has allowed VAR to go change that close of a call. This is one of my frustrations that I don't think it's talked enough about when it comes to the VAR discussion. Offsides is not black and white. I don't want to hear that it's right or wrong. 99% of the time, it is. You can clearly see a replay or two. Guy was a foot offside or was clearly on. It was just a mistake. I'm totally okay changing those calls. 100% behind that. That's why you have VAR there, is to help referees, where referees can go back and look and say, I made a mistake there, let's get it right. But when you get into these kind of molecular situations and you're drawing lines and trying to figure out if somebody's arm or somebody's foot was a millimeter ahead of somebody else's or a millimeter behind somebody else's, that is not clear and obvious. If you have to go through a 2 or 3 minute process to figure it out, it's not clear and obvious. So my bigger issue with the way that was all handled is that, from my perspective, that is not something VAR should touch. The Premier League, leagues in general, FIFA, UEFA, Major League Soccer, all these leagues have decided to let VAR be the decider on whether something was offside or not. And that goes back to also letting the play go through. If you play it out until the end of the move, then all of a sudden you're not asking whether a referee's call was right or wrong sometimes. You're just letting VAR make that decision. Sometimes then you get the flag that goes up and then you can go from there. But it's all going to the same larger point, which is relying on VAR to make that call, and I'm just not a fan of that, and this is why. I just don't feel like there's a need to get every single offside call, quote-unquote, right when you're talking about a matter of centimeters. That's my issue. If it's a couple feet, by all means, let's get it right. But it goes back to my same general philosophy about instant replay and specifically VAR. If you can't figure it out in 30 seconds and you can't look at the monitor couple replays and make a clear, confident decision, whether that's I got it right, there's no way that it was a clear and obvious error, or I made a big mistake, then you don't touch the call on the field. To me, I want to see that extended to VAR. And this is another example of that. So VAR is not the only problem and the only reason Liverpool is frustrated. But there is not... You're also making a choice to allow VAR to change a call like that I just think is completely unnecessary. I just don't think soccer fans care enough about getting every single offside call, quote-unquote, right, where you feel your team is hard done because we went back and found that the striker was 2 millimeters offside or 2 millimeters onside or whatever it might be. I just don't think people care that much. I think the consequences of inserting VAR into a situation like that outweigh the positives or the benefits that ultimately come out of it, which is that there may or may not have been offsides there because we still can't decide. Some people think one way, other people think the other, at least from what I've seen. To me, that's right there telling you it's not clear and obvious. This one really irks me. I just don't see offside as a black and white issue. So somehow Everton get a point out of this game after all of that. It was not an inspiring performance. It happens. Liverpool was good. It certainly decreased my confidence in Everton being able to really contend for a title. Not that I thought that they would heading into this game, but I wanted to see what they could do against Liverpool. And give them credit for finding ways to respond quickly twice and get those equalizers. But you look at the amount of things that Everton caught breaks on in this game. You start with Pickford. Of course, you got that goal that was disallowed at the end. Van Dijk gets hurt because of the reckless challenge from Pickford. If you're Jurgen Klopp in Liverpool, you're just kind of sitting there wondering how in the world you didn't come away with 3 points. It's one game. I still think Everton are very good, but I've got some more questions now just because Liverpool were so dominant. They were absolutely the better team, controlled large portions of that game. But now you're in a situation where Liverpool is going forward with Joe Gomez and Joel Matip as your center backs. They have never started together. They have never played as a pairing, which is kind of remarkable to think about, but that's a real question. So all of a sudden, the fact that Everton came away with a point, are still sitting there at the top of the table, with Aston Villa behind them. We'll get to them in our winners and losers. It's a massive break for Everton that they are still in a very good position. Now Liverpool is dealing with some significant injuries, both Van Dijk and Alisson. And everybody else has some ground to make up because City got off to a poor start. Spurs are still trying to figure things out. You can go down the list. Chelsea haven't had their team and have not performed particularly well. There's still a gap there. They managed to get through another game against a Big Six team and still feel really good about where they're at. I also don't know what Richarlison was doing. So this is your first test in terms of the depth and the ability to withstand the loss of one of these key attacking players. Now, Richarlison is not as important to this team as James Rodriguez or Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but he's still a very good player that can make a difference in a game, and you're not going to have him now because he's rightfully suspended for that tackle. I think that Everton were just incredibly lucky to find a way to come away with a point. Carlo Ancelotti has to be thrilled. From a public perception standpoint, they also didn't cover themselves in glory with those couple tackles. And the last thing I'll say on this game before we move on here is, for 2 seasons now, by and large, the narrative has been Liverpool catches every break. Liverpool is incredibly lucky. Yeah, they're really good, but they also just seem to have destiny on their side. Yeah, if you're going to do what they did last season, and if you're going to find a way to compete against Manchester City 2 years ago and take it down to the final game of the season, you're going to catch some breaks. All great teams do. They certainly, even in the Merseyside Derby, they've had their fair share of fortuitous bounces and weird things happening that favor them. But I think part of the reason they score so many goals late is their mentality, and it's the culture that Klopp has instilled. I'm a firm believer in that. They have created some of their own luck by the way that they approach the game and where they are from a mental standpoint, and the confidence and belief that they have in each other. But this is an example of, I don't want to hear Liverpool always gets lucky, Liverpool catches every break after that game. Everything possible went against them. They still found a way to get a point. I feel if Van Dijk had not been hurt, I would feel even more confident they're going to win the league. But now you got bigger questions that we're going to get to when we talk about Champions League in our final segment. That was one of the stranger games I've seen just from a what you come away talking about standpoint. When the stakes were so high, and just if it was a typical game without a Van Dijk injury and a red card and the controversial VAR ending, there would be a lot to talk about just in terms of what this game means moving forward for the rest of the season and the race for the title. But instead, we're talking about these other more important things because the Van Dijk injury is, to me, the biggest takeaway from this game. Liverpool were able to secure a point, which is something that the better teams in La Liga could not say over the weekend. Barcelona, Real Madrid, Sevilla all lose 1-0. Barcelona was away against Getafe. Real Madrid was at home to Cadiz. Sevilla on the road against Granada. Which, the confluence of those events is strange enough in and of itself. How often do you see Real Madrid and Barcelona losing at the same time? And then you throw in the unlikely scenario with Sevilla losing exactly when the two premier teams in this league do. This is a very, very unlikely scenario. But it's not just about the fact that they all lost. Here's the number you need to know from these three games. Those three teams combined for 2.1 expected goals. Their opponents, Getafe, Cadiz, and Granada, combined for 4.6. These teams didn't just lose. They got outplayed, by and large. Now, when you go down in your Barcelona, Real Madrid, of course, you're going to then control the ball, create some chances, things look better in the second half. But when the game was tied, they were getting outplayed, and then they just weren't able to find a late equalizer. These were losses that they deserved. The better teams were the teams that were not supposed to win these games. That's what's so shocking about this to me. But at the same time, it's not as shocking in this season, because I think we're going to see more of this. You already had Atletico Madrid go through a stretch where they can't score. You're seeing these teams drop points. And one of my questions going into this season about La Liga was, is there anybody that can contend beyond these top four? How big is that gap? Because generally it's a very large one. But both Real Madrid and Barcelona are vulnerable. This was coming for Real Madrid based on the way they've played. They've been really good defensively, but they just haven't looked great in attack all season. Barcelona is in chaos, regardless of how well they started this season. This is going to be a very bizarre La Liga season. And, of course, we're having bizarre things happen all over the world right now. But my two takeaways here. One, you got to pay attention to the XG and the way that these games actually played out. These were not fluky results. These were the better teams winning. The teams that put in the better performances. And two, this is just a season where we can't be surprised by that kind of stuff. It doesn't really change how I feel about the league and who's going to end up at the top of it and who the best teams in the league are. But this is not going to be a runaway situation. And it just goes to my other question here, which is, where are Real Madrid and Barcelona in the hierarchy of Europe when it comes to the Champions League? I just don't see either of them particularly close to competing for a Champions League. Now, you're never going to rule either of them out because of the players they have and the pedigree of the club. But they've got to catch some real breaks and put together some phenomenal performances to get to even a semifinal at this point. I just think there are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 teams better than them in the world right now. So now that we got Champions League starting, we're going to see how they shape up and how they match up with these other leagues. But I'm looking at Serie A right now. I'm looking at the Premier League and that depth. PSG just taking control of Ligue 1, doing what they always do. And of course you got Dortmund and Bayern in Germany. Leipzig also playing very well. I just don't think La Liga is on the level of some. Now, it's still better than Ligue 1, definitely. But when I'm looking at Bundesliga, Serie A, Premier League, I feel like they're a step ahead of La Liga. And this weekend is a perfect example of why I feel that way. Jumping back to the Premier League, Manchester City get past Arsenal. We're not going to go too in-depth here, but Raheem Sterling's 23rd minute goal is the difference. They did this without Kevin De Bruyne. They get Sergio Aguero back, which is massive because you're still missing Gabriel Jesus. They haven't had a striker. Now they do. So he was sort of playing up there with Raheem Sterling. To the incident with the assistant referee, all I'm going to say is I have not seen a woman come to Aguero's defense, which tells me all I need to know about whether he was in the wrong there. I don't want to hear Pep Guardiola and his thoughts on this. Let's listen to the women who experience this kind of thing on a regular basis. You can debate whether it's worth any kind of punishment, what his intentions actually were. It could, I'm not gonna say he had bad intentions, but that doesn't mean it was okay. I would like to see him apologize and own up to the fact that that was, to me, that was not okay, and I'm basing that off of the people that are coming to his defense and the people that are being very vocal and saying, I'm not okay with that. That's not cool. I don't want to make any sweeping declarations. I don't want to get too much into it, but I did want to acknowledge that I think it was wrong. Regardless, it's not a good look, but it would be nice to see Aguero apologize for that, because I'm not seeing a 50-50 split here in terms of some people are interpreting it one way and some are not. The people who would be in a position like that, again, going back to women who have a much better idea because they deal with this stuff every day in a way that we as men don't, are all saying not cool. On the actual game itself, other thing I wanted to say, this City defense continues to look better with this sort of revamped back line and Diaz and Laporte. I jumped on that pretty quickly and thought that there was something there. I really believe that now. Whether it's three at the back or just the two of them, that's a really positive sign. They're starting to get some of these attacking players back. I'm feeling better about Manchester City. I refuse to jump off of them entirely and feel very justified with this result. Another win against a team playing well that's dangerous. It's starting to come together. The question is whether they can consistently put together these kind of performances, or whether you're going to see these weird, poor showings like they had against Leicester a little while back. Then we're jumping over to MLS quickly with a couple things. These were just too big, in my opinion, to ignore, even with everything that happened this weekend in Europe. The Supporters Shield Foundation Board of Directors has, at least for now, decided there's not going to be a Supporters Shield this season. They cited the imbalanced schedule and the lack of fans in the stands as the reasons, and just saying we can't do it. We don't feel like it's right. Which then led to a avalanche of criticism, headlined by Greg Vanney, who just ripped into it. Jim Curtin said he was surprised or confused or something about it. So now there was a tweet sent out that the board of directors is holding another meeting, going to discuss this further, which to me means there's a good chance they reverse this decision, which just makes them look really silly, but they're facing so much pressure. And the reason they're facing so much pressure is that, first of all, since when does MLS play a balanced schedule where you feel like it's completely level and that everybody has the exact same opportunities? That's not how this league works. It's always imbalanced. Yes, it's more extreme this year, but it's not like you line up every team and they all play each other twice. And so to suggest that because of the circumstances this season, you can't actually or fairly determine the best team in the league, I just don't buy that for a second. And more importantly to me, in this sport that distinguishes itself from practically every other sport by rewarding regular season champions and crowning them as the winners of their leagues. Of course, MLS doesn't do that, but broadly speaking, that's how soccer works. It's one of the reasons I love this sport. I'm a firm believer in the importance of the regular season. It's why I want to see automatic bids in the NCAA tournament go to regular season champions, not conference tournament champions. And that's why the Supporters Shield is here, to at least have something for Major League Soccer's best team to point to, because it's the U.S. and everybody wants playoffs. It is laughable to me that we're going to potentially finish this season with no tangible reward for the best team in the league. Now, I understand you get the financial benefits and you get the CONCACAF Champions League spot, but that's just for being one of the best teams in the league and qualifying to represent your league in the CONCACAF Champions League. That is not for an actual trophy for winning this league. I don't understand this at all. It's ridiculous. Toronto's incensed, as they should be. The Union held on against New England last night, so if they can beat Toronto in their next game, they're right there. This is a big deal. Toronto wants trophies. The Union have never won one except for a preseason tournament back in 2013 or something. This matters. I cannot fathom a world in which a soccer league doesn't have a trophy and a tangible representation of the team that was the best in the regular season. If the Union find a way to catch Toronto, or Seattle catches fire and somehow wins this thing, there's no disputing they're the best team in the league. If Toronto finishes this out, there's no disputing they're the best team in the league. To date, they have been and are, as a result, in line to get the Supporters' Shield. It's unbelievable to me. We'll see what happens, whether they actually change this. It was just unanimous frustration, and I'm right there with everybody else. I don't get it one bit. On the more positive side for Major League Soccer, the Union have finally officially announced the sale of Brendan Aronson to Red Bull Salzburg. This had been coming. It just hadn't been official from the Union side yet. He's staying with the team through the end of the season, which is what was always going to happen, and a massive deal for Philly. They kept this team together, which was my question coming out of MLS's back, because there were so many teams interested in Aronson and Mark McKenzie. They're both there. They're probably both good. Aronson is gone after the season. McKenzie probably is too. But they get this group one more shot, push for the Supporters' Shield, one more playoff run. And this is a home run all the way around for everybody involved. Aronson was ready to go. He should be in Europe. He's proven everything he needs to in Major League Soccer. And the Union are getting what they deserve for developing him and setting him up in a position to succeed in the form of the most expensive homegrown transfer in MLS history. This is what they're trying to do. He sets the precedent, and there are going to be more coming after him. McKenzie's next in line. Anthony Fontana's scoring goals left and right, whether he's coming off the bench or starting, so he's going to probably take that spot at the top of the diamond for him next season. This is how, when you're not LAFC, Seattle, these bigger clubs with all kinds of money, this is how you can finance it. This is what the Union want to be, and this is the first sort of proof of concept that this is actually working. Of course, it's working by the fact that they're now making the playoffs consistently and have been one of the better teams in the league these past couple of seasons. But it's also, we can actually sell these guys to Europe. Europe wants our players. So now it's up to Aronson to go prove at Salzburg he's worth the money, he's capable of playing at that level, that these MLS guys can translate to Europe, which it's becoming harder to doubt when you see what Alphonso Davies is doing at Bayern and things like that. The more guys MLS can sell like this, the better. And it's a perfect fit for Aronson for a couple different reasons. He gets to play for a former MLS coach who also happens to be an American, in Jesse Marsch, who understands this transition, went through it himself, is going to have a really good relationship with him, is familiar with him, obviously speaks his language, and just understands where Aronson comes from as an MLS guy. And the spots where he's going to need to adjust or take a different approach or whatever it might be at the level he's now playing at in Europe. And also from a systematic standpoint, the Union are very similar to the Red Bull conglomerate in the way they want to play. It's high intensity, pressing, quick transition. Aaronson's one of those guys that runs all over the field. He's going to do that for you. It's a perfect fit. I love this all the way around. He was ready to go. The Union get their massive transfer fee and get to keep him for the rest of the season. I don't think anybody could have asked for anything more. Salzburg, Union, Aronson, to me, it checks every box for everybody. It's a win-win-win, if you will. That was a lot, but those are our first 5. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, winners and losers of the weekend from Europe, including the only Premier League team who has won every game they've played so far. And yes, that team is Aston Villa. You're watching Touchline Talk on 110 Sports.